we go. Hey, everybody. I think we're alive. I feel alive. Are we alive? I feel alive. I'm alive. Am I alive? Somebody tell me if you can hear me. Anybody? Bueller. Scott Jernigan needs a significant raise. Can you hear me? Thank you, Alan. God bless it, Alan. What a simple thing you do for me. I really appreciate that, man. Hey, everybody. It is the Wednesday edition of the Mike Meyers Ask Mike Anything live stream. The goal of this live stream is to provide those of us who are isolated by the coronavirus an opportunity to continue our studies for our CompTIA certifications. Now, we do concentrate on the CompTIA A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, but we can certainly go outside of that a little bit, as well as discuss general technical questions. So, the whole idea here is to ask me questions and I'll answer them for you. So you ask questions by typing them here into the chat here on YouTube, or if you're the shy type, there's nothing wrong with that. Feel free to contact me directly. My email address is michaelm@totalsem.com. And if you feel you've got a complicated question or something, just go ahead and email it to me. We can discuss it there. Also, if you're a gamer, I am Senor Pepe, and that's for Steamers, and then for about anybody else, I'm just Desweds, DESWEDS, at just about everything. So that is how you can get a hold of me. So do understand that the whole goal of this live stream is that you ask me questions and I answer them. Now, we do have special topics that come along from time to time. For example, today we're going to be talking about building your dream system. And I think you're going to find this interesting. And no, I'm not going to go spend $7,000 on a system. In fact, we're going to try to avoid talking about money as much as possible and more getting the system that you can afford how you want it more than anything else. To avoid all those yawns I did on Monday, I've got myself stock full of good, strong French roast coffee here. So hopefully that's going to avoid that. And I got a good night's sleep last night too, so we should be in good shape. Plus, we're talking about hardware, which is always one of my favorite things to talk about because I'm a hardware nerd. And I think you guys are going to find this very interesting. This is basically the rule sets that I use to help me get where I'm going to go when I'm building up a system. So that's the major game plan for today. Let's see. Oh, nobody was on. Now people are starting to show up. Michael Reeves, Alan's there, Dave Rush. Okay, so do keep in mind that I'm assisted by my employees and good friends, Captain Dave Rush, as well as Scott Jernigan, and they'll be moderating as they always do on this thing. So if you have a question and I miss it, don't panic. Scott or Dave will usually catch it. Sometimes they'll try to answer the questions themselves, but if I do miss it, just ask again. It's not that big of a deal. And sometimes I just get all pontificatey and I miss a question, so no panics. What else do we have going here today? Do keep in mind that we do have the unofficial Discord channel. This Discord channel is not affiliated with Mike Meyers. I don't run it. It's not part of Total Seminars. It's actually my buddy Jose Braden spun this thing up. But I will be on the Discord channel today after our AMA. So if you guys want to talk on a more casual basis, as it were, that is very much... we're there for you. Just reading here a little bit. Saudi Adam, I'm lost with the RAM section in SATA. Good. Then you need to ask some questions. Sam McFarland, hey Sam, how's it going, man? Martha Kaiser, I need to pass my A+ exam. Martha, you're in the right place. We're going to be doing discussion of building a dream system today, but that's only going to take probably about 45 minutes to an hour. And then we got another hour of just answering any kind of questions you want. So I'm going to warn you right now, Martha Kaiser, I am glad to help you, but you're going to have to ask me better questions than just help me or where do I start? We're going to have to see, we can't help you. We can't help you, but you're in the right place, kiddo. So like Saudi Adam, you're from Hungary. That's kind of cool. That's all we need is more you Europeans around here. So we got folks from Belgium and Hungary, man. We're covering the entire the EU subcontinent there pretty well. Just so if I turn away like this, folks, I'm just looking to make sure if we have any questions that have popped right up. I would more info on how Tor browser works to make you hidden. Okay, we could do that. It's a VPN. Just making a couple of notes here, kids. Okay. All right, so a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to be giving away some practice questions today, probably after our first little discussion. And then secondly, for those of us who are interested, we do offer 50% discounts on all of our Total Seminars products. So this is going to be our A+ practice tests, our Network Plus practice tests, our Security Plus practice tests, as well as bundles. And when I say bundles, we're talking about performance-based questions, which are really big for A+ and Net Plus. We don't do performance-based questions for Security Plus quite yet, but we're working on it. But we saw all these bundles, and the only people who get this deal are people who are listening in on this live stream, and you get them for 50% off, which is an amazing deal. So to take advantage of that, all you got to do is go to www.totalsem.com, head over to our merchant area, grab practice questions, and then just before you log out, just before you pull out your credit card, you're going to use... I'm going to let Scott Jernigan, he's going to put it up there on the chat. And there you go. Thank you, Scott. So the code is 011121, and you get half off. Folks, not only do I have the best practice questions anyway, but my practice questions are like already less than half of what most everybody else are. And here's another 50% off on top of that. So it's absolutely ridiculous. So Martha, I'm going to warn you. One of the things that if you're going to say, I don't know what to do first, I'm going to say you need practice questions, you need a video, and you need a book. Most people need those three things to pass any certification, not just mine, anybody's. And that's why I sell a video and a book and practice questions, is because that's what people's needs. And if you're not a good reader, you could probably skip the book. Or maybe if you're not a good watcher of videos, maybe you could skip the video, but you're going to have one or two of those, and you're going to have practice questions, and I just gave you a heck of a deal. Henry Costa, how about simulations? So by simulations, are you talking about the performance-based questions that we see on the CompTIA exams? Well, yes. We sell those as a separate product. So we have A+, what we call the Total Sims. And so we have those for the A+ and the Network Plus. And that 50% deal that I have includes bundles. So if you want to buy the practice questions and the Sims together, you get those at 50% off as well. So it's crazy. Our prices are insane. All right. Sam McFarland. Hey, Mike, who would you trust? The VPN that comes with McAfee's? Would you trust the McAfee VPN? Yeah, it's all right. I don't know why people would want to use it. I'm not against it. I prefer, if I'm spinning something up, I'm usually going to go with OpenVPN more often than not. And I do like Tor. I like Tor quite a bit. I use the Tor browser. I mean, why even bother spinning up some extra VPN stuff? Tor browser works great. I use it all the time. Martha's already got my book. All right. Kevin Lopez. ¿Cómo está, amigo? Richard Ocampo. Are prices for A+ exam always the same price? For the you mean to take the exam? CompTIA sets those prices. We have nothing to do with that. Though, are they always the same price? Yes, although CompTIA from time to time raises the price, which I think they just did at like 5% or something like that. Henry Costa's from Washington, D.C., and/or you're from Washington, D.C. by way of Costa Rica. I've been to both places. I got a brother in Georgetown. It's been a while since I've been to Costa Rica, though. Okay, so the other thing I do want you guys to keep remember is that, like any other YouTube channel, it really helps if you like this channel and if you subscribe. So be sure to hit that like button. It's just, after watching YouTube videos for so many years, it makes me laugh to say that. You know, if you like what you see, hit the like. If you don't like it, hit the down arrow. Anyway, subscribe to this thing and help rationalize me keeping this going, which I'm glad to do. And we're going to keep going for a while. Any other quickie questions before we dive into this? Okay. All right, Mike Saudi, I want you to start asking me some RAM questions. Max, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. What I want you to do is let's talk about building your dream system. But then when I'm done, I'm going to be literally waiting for you to ask some questions about either RAM or SATA or both. So, you know, there's a certain point, you know what RAM is, okay? So where do we start running into trouble? So I want you to take advantage of this hour or so while we're talking about building dream systems and get your questions lined up so that we can get you where you need to go, man. Dear Keys, hi Mike, I passed the A+. Hey, big round of applause to you, sir. What should I do next, Network or Security Plus? Generally, I think Network Plus. I really love Network Plus. Seriously, I call it the most important certification you'll never need. It's hard for me to tell you that the Network Plus will get you a job. But what I can tell you is that getting a Network Plus will make going Cisco or cloud or any other direction you want to go a lot easier. This time last year, I did not know what RAM was. Eddie Lagos, is the discount already reflected in the shown price? Eddie, I don't even know what the prices of my own products are. I'm going to let Eddie, just go ahead and keep your eye on the chat window. Scott Jernigan and or Dave Rush, can you please answer Eddie Lagos' question? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. It is not reflected that once you type it in, you see the better price. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm pretty excited. I got to tell you, this came as a request as a topic to be discussed, and it is a great topic, and that is, so you want to build a system, and a lot goes into the process of building, and in this case, we're talking about building a desktop because it's about the only thing you can build these days. And in this case, what I'm going to be talking about is a more general purpose desktop system, like your primary home office system. We will discuss gaming, but it's not going to be a requirement of this. I think very few people need high-end gaming systems. Even gamers, most gamers don't even need a high-end gaming system. They just never work their system that hard. But I want to be talking about brand names. I want to be talking about some of the philosophies that go into building a system up. And hopefully we have some really good ideas here. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So you've reached a point and you say to yourself, for one reason or another, I need a new system. And I know that pain. Boy, do I know that pain. And computers are generally pretty expensive, and it's not something you go into lightly. And by the way, don't tell me you can't afford it, because you probably can. So what do? You know, what's your first big step when it comes to building a system? Well, the first thing you have to define is that what is this system doing for me? And that one's not too hard. If you think about it, we've already said we're going to be building a desktop system. This is going to be your main system in the office where you're getting the work done when you're at home. This is your COVID office. This is going to be if you're a gamer, you're going to be gaming on this system. And it's going to be a desktop system. It's going to be a tower or a mid-tower case sitting underneath your desk. And you're going to have some monitors and keyboards and blah, blah, blah. So what I want to concentrate on today is the core system case itself. So today I want to be talking about CPU, RAM, motherboard, core storage, and cooling. And I want to see if we can get that done in an hour, and that's all I want to do today. People can have 4-day discussions on what's the best keyboard out there, and to be honest with you kids, I tend to stay out of those conversations because everybody's right. Oh, Scott Jernigan, sorry guys, just so you know, this week's discounts are only for bundles, so you have to get like the A+ practice questions and the simulations. There's preset bundles, and those are the ones that are 50% off. Okay. Okay, so the biggest question is where do you start? And when I'm building a new desktop system, the first thing that I'm going to be thinking about more than anything else is the classic, am I going Intel or am I going AMD? Now, Intel and AMD have been fighting each other for your PC dollars since the early 1980s. And I've been lucky enough to watch all this entire time. It's pretty interesting. For the last about 4 or 5 years, AMD has been the dominant CPU maker with their Ryzen line. But guys, it hasn't always been that way. And there's a chance that might be changing again. For many years, for over a decade before about 2015, 2016, Intel was very much dominant over AMD. And AMD was always playing catch up. But right now, AMD is, in my opinion, the dominant desktop processor system. And I just, you could do a Google search and do Intel versus AMD, and I think you'll find plenty of people who agree with me. I'm not saying that Intel doesn't have great CPUs. They do. Intel has amazing CPUs. However, right now, in terms of bang for the buck, AMD is definitely the leader with the Ryzen processors. Okay, so when we're talking about AMD is a company that makes processors. They make a lot more than just CPUs, folks. They make a lot more. But if we're going to just be talking about what AMD makes, or what we can talk about what Intel makes too, we don't want to separate those too much, is that when they make a particular family of CPUs based on some kind of microarchitecture, you hear things like Kaby Lake or something like that, and these different microarchitectures are the basis of which a lot of different CPUs get made from. So in the Intel world, what we have is we talk about the core, the Intel core. So we have the core i3s, i5s, i7, i9s. These separations are basically, like for example, the i3s lack a lot of the features that all the other CPUs lack. I don't even look at those as an option. The sweet spot is the i5s and the i7s. With the i5, and don't worry, the same thing happens with Ryzen. So we're about to do this all over again. So with i5 versus i7, we're going to be talking about usually the number of cores that are operating more than anything else, processing speed. Those would be the big ones more than anything else. And then the next step up from there is going to be like your i9s, which are going to have more cores, sometimes more speed. And so you're really talking about a fairly thin amount of difference between these different i5, i3, i5, i7, i9s. And by the way, Ryzen has the same thing. You have Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9, and they are pretty much designed to go toe-to-toe with each other in terms of feature set. So it doesn't matter if you want to go Intel or if you want to go AMD, you're still going to have these, Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9. There's usually some other step above that with names like Threadripper and things like that. I'm going to avoid those for right now. We'll see if anybody asks any questions on them. I'm not against them. I just think that some of these super high-end CPUs begin to fade out in terms of functionality as a desktop and more into what I would call a workstation. Much more powerful and much, much more expensive. Okay, so if I'm going to be buying processors, I'm usually going to be buying somewhere in the Ryzen 5, Ryzen 7, i5, i7. There's a very simple reason for that, and that is I'm going to draw a picture, okay? So this is, we'll do it so you guys see it. So I'm going to make a chart, okay? So what we have here is on the x-axis is processing power, however you want to measure that. And then on the y-axis is price. And you can do this with any family of CPUs. What you'll do is down here, and this is what's being sold today, okay? I'm not talking about old stuff from the old days. You'll see that it kind of goes like this, where as processing power goes up, the cost doesn't go up a lot, not much. But then you'll start to hit these like really ridiculous arches like this. And whenever I'm buying CPUs, and I've done this for 20 years and it still works today, is I want to buy the most power I can before the price tag starts to shoot up. And you can pretty much count on that being in the lower end Ryzen 7s, lower end i7s, and it's just been that way for such a long time, and it really, really works. So when I'm buying CPUs, I tend to think initially in terms of Ryzen 7s because, in my opinion, AMD is red hot right now. And so that's where I'm going to go for, okay? We're going to be looking at some prices and stuff here in a minute, but I just want you guys to understand that there's not a ton of magic here. You're not, again, forget the Ryzen 3s and the i3s. Just take those out of the equation. But in the i5, i7, i9 world, once you're in the i7 world, you're going to have all the features you could possibly dream of. Unless there's something real specific that you need to do. And again, you've already be marching outside of the home desktop system and more into the workstation world. So it's not much more complicated than that. There's a lot of granulation when we get into this here in a little bit, and you're going to see here in a minute once you say, well, I want to get an i7. Okay, well, good. All right, so you picked or I want to get a Ryzen 7. Okay, great. Get a Ryzen 7. Well, there's a lot of Ryzen 7s out there. So which one are you going to pick? Well, what I'm usually going to do in that case is I'm going to be going for price. And if I'm within the family and I've got one that's a little bit slower than this other Ryzen 7 that's faster, I'm going to go with the slower one because that's going to be plenty of firepower for me. Usually somebody yells and complains about this point. Tolowit likes the Ryzen 7 2700X, which is a good Ryzen 7. Won't argue that one. Okay, so once you've got yourself kind of in a CPU world, now the only thing you're going to have to be worrying about more than anything else is you're going to be finding a motherboard to fit that. Now, as I hope we know, CPUs come with socket types, and it just depends where we are in the world at any given moment. Is that in the AMD versus the Intel world, we can have 5 or 6 or 7 different kinds of popular sockets that are out there for a cross-section of CPUs. Or we can be like we are today, and like to say you're going to be sticking with AMD, the only socket out there is the AM4. And it's been that way for a couple of years. So, let's see, I'm going to pull, actually do have a couple small things to show you here. So this is an article that came out of Newegg a couple of last spring. It's still pretty good. All right, so here they have a list of all the sockets that you need to know. So let's take a click. Can I make this a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see it? There we go. So if we take a look at this, first of all, if it says LGA in the front, those are Intel sockets. So right now, about the only 3 sockets you're going to be seeing commonly. Everything I say today, you'll be able to find an exception somewhere, okay? Commonly. These are the big ones. All right, are going to be the LGA, I guess I could do it in their order, although it's kind of backwards to me. So, well, no, I'm not. It's LGA 1151, which is for the older versions of the i7, well, i5, i7, and i9s. Currently, what we're seeing just coming along now is the LGA 1200, which is going to be for the 10th or the latest generation of i5, i7s, i9s, the cores. And then if you're going a slightly different direction, we got the LGA 2066, which is more like the workstation type. Anyway, down here is, since we're talking about AMD, really right now AMD has the AM4 socket, which fits pretty much all of their AMD Ryzens. There is the STRX4, which is just really starting to come alive now. And then there's the STR4, which is exclusively a workstation. But so really what we're talking about is we're probably going to be perfectly happy getting an AM4. Well, you're starting to zero in on things because now you've said, okay, well, I've picked a Ryzen 7. I want the AM4. So, and you pretty much just made all those choices because Mike Meyers told you to, and you'd be right. Keep in mind, folks, a couple of things on buying systems that you need to keep in mind. Number one, there's always going to be something that's coming out in the future that will tempt you to say, I'm going to wait. Don't do that, because there's always something that's going to be coming out in the future that's going to make you wait. And if you need a system, it's just go get the system. You'll be fine. Desktop system should be able to last, in my opinion, 6 years or more if you don't have to cannibalize it for your next system. And there's nothing better than an old desktop system, which becomes a great NAS for your office or your home. I've got a lot of old computers that are still alive and functioning and doing great, but I just turn them into NASs, and they're still cranking along just fine. Yeah, if you can get six years out of a desktop system is great. 3 years out of a laptop is great. And gosh, for tablets and smart devices, if you can get a year, or if I can get a year out of them, I'm doing great. Yeah, I know somebody out there has had theirs for 7 years. God bless you. All right, so anyway, so we've got an idea of what we're going to be looking at. So the big thing we have now, this is the single hardest part of buying a system. And that is the motherboard, because you can just get easily overwhelmed when it comes to motherboards. So if you're going to be dealing with motherboards, first of all, the nice thing is there's probably, I don't know, 15, 20 different manufacturers out there. And so the trick is number one, if you start finding yourself falling in love with certain manufacturers. For example, I like Asus. Asus has been a motherboard maker for a long time. They tend to be a little more expensive. They tend to be a little bit higher end. Gigabyte is another name. Gosh, there's so many more. But just as most people think Intel and AMD for processors, I tend to go with Gigabyte versus Asus more often than not. There's other players in there that I'm momentarily not able to remember in my brain, but I'm scrolling through trying to find one real quick. Yeah, everybody's Asus. Okay. So what motherboard are you going to buy? First of all, form factor, in my opinion, doesn't mean dibbity. If you're talking about a classic desktop system, it's going to be sitting under your desk. I don't care if it's going to be one of these little mini ITXs that are this big, or if it's going to be a micro ATX, which would be about that big, or if it's going to be a full-size ATX, which would be about that big. All of them fit in the same boxes. It doesn't matter. So, no, I need to be careful I say that with ITX. Sorry. So with the mini ATX and the full-size ATX. So I'm going to get an ATX form factor. That's like 95% of all the desktop motherboards out there are full-size ATX form factor anyway. Here, you guys not sure what an ATX form factor looks like? Here, I'll pull one up for you real quick. So here's one. So that is actually a micro ATX. That's about 9 inches by about 9 inches. So that's a little bit on the small side. So obviously, you're going to want a motherboard that's going to fit your CPU. Dirt. Okay, that works pretty well. So one of the big shopping criteria that I'm going to be looking for is not necessarily the processor. I'm not going to be going on these websites looking for a Ryzen 7 motherboard. I'm going to be going in and looking for an AM4 motherboard. That's how most of the manufacturers do it. Now, there's plenty of good sells out there. Like I'm on Newegg, which is fine. Although, personally, I'm a big fan of a website called Micro Center. And I like Micro Center because they are not only a good online source, but they also have brick and mortar stores here in the United States, which I find extremely handy. So here's good old Micro Center here. I'm going to make that a little bit smaller so you guys can see it. So this is Micro Center. They're great guys. Again, I don't really care where you buy your components from. It doesn't really matter to me because, you know, we get pretty much all the same components, same manufacturers. The only real challenge is you know, shipping and handling and things like that, because they can get a little spendy. Absolutely. So let's think about this motherboard for a minute. Now, the easy thing to think about on this motherboard is, well, will my CPU fit in it? Yeah. We're going to double check that, by the way. Even though we're going to be looking at AM4 motherboards, there's still things we might want to double check. But some of the other issues come into play that are very important that people don't think about when they're thinking about a motherboard. For example, how much RAM does it take? Now, most motherboards for desktop systems today have 4 slots in it, and today it's pretty much all going to be DDR4. That's great, but do you see yourself needing more? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. There are certainly motherboards out there that have chipsets that can support up to 8 slots. That might be something you want to consider. Other little things get us in trouble. Pretty much every desktop system out there is going to have an RJ45 connector, but maybe you want wireless. A huge number of motherboards out there have built-in wireless all the way through 802.11ax. Is that something you might want, or do you want to go ahead and buy a wireless card? If your system is going to be plugged in, maybe you want a motherboard with 2 RJ45 connectors. Ever thought about that? Some people like that. Some people don't. That's something else to consider. Other things to consider is how many USB ports do you need? And I'm not just talking about the USB ports that are hanging out on the back end of a motherboard. All motherboards also come with external connectors, which allow you to plug in external connectors on the front of a case, or sometimes even in the back of the case, which is becoming popular. That's another thing to consider. Another thing to consider that's important is, do you want PS2 ports? Right now, especially if you're a more serious gamer, the old school PS2 ports, let me pull one of these up. All right, I'm going to show you an old picture, but I just want to make sure that we all know what we're talking about here. Hang on. So these types of ports that you see right here, these are PS2 ports. PS2 ports are ancient, but for people who are into gaming, they're convinced that PS2 ports have a faster response than USB, so that can be very popular. Other things that you might want to consider coming off the back of a system. Do you want onboard graphics? Now, we're going to be talking about on this system is we're going to get a video card, but some people like to have onboard graphics. There's some good arguments for having onboard graphics. For number one, if you don't want to spend a ton of money on a graphics card, Most motherboards today come in with their built-in graphics. Now, look, you're not going to be able to run Crysis 2077 on them, but you'd be able to play World of Warcraft. The onboard graphics, both for AMD and Intel processors, it's pretty good. And let's say you're building a system, for your folks. They're not going to be gaming. A lot of times, boy, you can just take $200 to $400 off the cost of your computer. You don't even buy a graphics card because it comes with onboard graphics. So you want to make sure your motherboard supports that. Usually just one good HDMI connector, and you're in good shape there. What else do we have to worry about there? Scott ringing. This message was deleted. See if anyone's in a panic on anything here. Sam McFarland, why would you want to have two RJ45 ports? I like to have two RJ45. One of the reasons I like to have two, Sam, is I keep one connection just for my local computer, just for the PC itself. Then I use the second one as a direct port to my virtualized machines. And it makes it cleaner for me, keeps it more separate. I could do it all on a single RJ45, you're absolutely right. But it's just better housekeeping. I can do all kinds of fun little things when you got two RJ45s. You say you want to play with routing, okay? I can go ahead, and because I have two physical RJ45s, I can spin up firewall software and all kinds of stuff. That's, again, you can do it, but it's a lot easier with two RJ45s. Guillermo's like, why would you go wireless? Because I don't have wires. I love wireless. I'm a big believer in it. But if I have a desktop system, especially if it's something I own or control, my home office, my office at work, if I can get RJ45s to my desktop, I'm going to do that. I'm going to work hard to do that. Even here with this setup we're seeing right here, guys, this is kind of in the middle of my living room, say, and for the last 7 months, I've got a gray piece of RJ45 cable just running over there because I would not be comfortable doing a live stream on wireless. I do wireless all the time. We all do wireless all the time, but for serious stuff, I'm always going to have a wire if at all possible. Okay, what else are we talking about while we're in there? Boy, there's a few other things I'm going to be thinking. I'm not thinking about on the motherboard that's going to bug me later. Little things that come into play. For example, storage. Every motherboard on Earth is going to have 4 SATA connectors. That's not what I'm talking about. Well, they'll have 2. Most have 4. But the other big thing that's popular these days is to have more than one M.2 connector. And I find these very convenient. In my view, the beauty of the M.2 drives is that in a perfect world, I'm going to have one M.2 drive, which is really nothing more than my operating system boot or upper. And traditionally that started because I couldn't afford the capacity necessary with my M.2 drive to have something bigger. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, folks, that a higher capacity M.2 drive would have been 256 megabytes. That's not true anymore. And easily you can find 2 terabyte M.2s, although they're spendy. But right now, the price differential between 1 terabyte versus 2 terabyte M.2s is outrageous. You can buy 1 terabyte M.2 drives for $100 here in the States. And the 2 terabytes are going to be more in the $400 range. Anyway, to have those dual M.2s is often very convenient. I can go ahead and set one aside and make that my always the operating system I boot up to, usually Windows for a desktop. But then everything else is going to be stored outside of that. So traditionally what I would do back when they were expensive with my old 128 gig or 200 Gig, funny. Drive, yeah, 128 gig, 256 gig drive. There we go. We're not lying anymore. Is that I'd have that small drive to boot Windows, and then I'd have an old school SATA drive. And the SATA drive, that's where I'd be storing all my games, all my personal stuff, and all that would be separately. Today with dual M.2s, usually because I'm upgrading a system anyway, I find that to be extremely convenient, that I can still have the single boot system and then put in a second M.2 for personal storage. It's mainly more of an upgrade path more than anything else. If I didn't have that upgrade path, I would probably go with a single M.2, and these days a terabyte of SSD goes a long way. Eddie Lagos, what about the speed of RAM? We will, Eddie. We're going to keep going. We haven't really got to RAM yet, but we will be talking about the speed of the RAM. We will. Guillermo, is the chipset part of the whole system BIOS process? Right. No. You have a CPU. You have a chipset, which is support chips that are designed to work with this CPU. For example, a particular chipset, which we're going to talk about here in a minute too. This particular chipset, these are where all the USB ports come out of. Or on this chipset, this is where the sound support comes out of. But it's designed to work with a particular CPU or family of CPUs. That's one thing. Now we got another chip in there, which we call your BIOS. Let me make sure I want to use your terms. So BIOS stands for Basic Input Output Services. There's a third chip, which is your BIOS chip. And your BIOS chip has the initial code that boots up your system. Some of that might actually be stored in the chipset, but not all of it. So that is a third chip. I will tell you that the BIOS, remember BIOS is software. BIOS is software or firmware because it's burned into a flash ROM chip. And so that's what actually stores the initial boot code. But I will tell you that system BIOS knows a lot about your chipset. He knows how to talk to it. Eddie Lagos, is there a difference in types of M.2 where some run faster? Yes. M.2 is a connector type. When you say M.2, that's like saying DVI or HDMI. It's a physical, I shouldn't be careful because HDMI is also a protocol. It's a physical type. So the M.2, let me bring one of those up. I don't have any, that'll work. Take a look at this, guys. So this is two M.2 connectors on a motherboard. So this is a motherboard that's got two of these M.2s right here. So M.2 is a physical type of connection. The language that goes through there is either going to be old school SATA, which is the same language as a regular SATA drive, or if at all possible, you're going to be speaking NVMe. So NVMe means, non-volatile memory, I don't know. Scott Jernigan's our king of what do they stand for. So when you're buying a M.2 drive, you can have two identical M.2 drives. They're identical. Sitting there, you're pulling them off the box. One's going to say SATA, and the other one's going to say NVMe. So you've got to be very careful to make sure your motherboard supports. If you can do NVMe, you do NVMe, period. If you can't do NVMe, then you're going to do SATA. But most motherboards today support NVMe. The other challenge you run into with NVMe is that there's different versions of it now. Like we're just coming into version 4. And so when you're buying a NVMe M.2 drive, you want to make sure you're running the right version of NVMe that your motherboard can support. So if like you have a super edgy motherboard that supports NVMe 4 and you have NVMe 3 drive, you're fine. Vice versa, there's a bit of a question mark. So if you have a motherboard that can support NVMe 3 and you put in an NVMe 4 drive, there's still question marks in there whether it's the right thing to do. With some it works fine, with others it's questionable. So, and we're actually jumping ahead a little bit here because I want to talk about, as we pick that motherboard, what are some of the criteria we're looking for, and that's going to include RAM speed. So bear with me, guys. All right, so we've got our CPU, and we've got what we think is the motherboard. But let's go ahead. I'm actually going to go over to Micro Center. We're going to do some motherboard shopping. So I'm going to bring you up on the browser here. So let's look at, here's some computer parts. We'll look under AMD motherboards. Let's see what they got. So you're going to see just about everybody does stuff like this now, where they give you little check boxes to help you zero in on things. So here's some brand names. I'm not going to click on that because I want to see what else is up there. Price, which is an interesting thing, but that's not really what I'm interested in. What I'm mainly interested in here, I want you guys to look at, oh yeah, cookies, is socket type. So that helps us zero in on the type of socket we want. Okay, so here we go. Socket type, CPU, well, we want AMD. That's going to be easy. Ryzen, they've got one Threadripper motherboard in here. We're going to ignore that. But here's the next thing I want to talk about, and that is the chipsets here. So you can see there's a bunch of chipsets. Most of them start with the number X, or they start with the number B. The chipset really defines what your motherboard can do. It's the chipset that defines how many M.2 slots you're going to have. It's the chipset that defines how many slots of memory you're going to have. Now you got to be careful here. A lot of CPUs can support a lot more memory than the chipsets allow. Okay, so chipsets can't make more appear than what the CPU can handle, but they can certainly do less. It's the chipset that defines how much USB you're going to have. And what is the USB 3.0, 3.1, 2.0, 2.1, you know, that kind of stuff. So that's all part of the chipset. So part of the criteria that I'm going to be using when I'm picking in a motherboard is I'm really going to be thinking about the chipset. Now, the nice part is both Intel and AMD do a good job giving us places to look. So let's take a peek at, I want to keep that open because we're coming back there. So we're going to take a look at chipsets. Let's do it for AMD for starters. Here we go. So I'm just on the AMD website here, guys. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and just cut this out, and I'm going to put it up on the chat window so you guys can see exactly where I'm at. These pages are actually kind of cool because Intel and AMD are notorious about changing the locations on all kinds of stuff. These haven't changed in a long time, many years. Let's get back in there and take a look at it. Okay. All right, so here you can see it kind of bases it on socket somewhat, all right? So I'm going to look at socket AM4. Let's click on Learn More. And here are all the different chipsets. Here are all the different chipsets that AMD has designed for socket AM4. So the A's are junk, all right? B's are kind of more of the mainstream ones. They're more inexpensive, they're more stable, They tend to lack some of the features. The X chipsets are the ones that can support overclocking and all kinds of groovy stuff like that. So usually for me, I'm just going to go with whatever number. If I'm feeling like I want a more stable system, I'm going to go with a B, and then I'd go with the biggest number, just always the biggest number. It's actually interesting when you're building systems, most of the chipsets that you're going to see on motherboards are going to be the higher end of whatever they might be. They're either going to be the higher end of the X's, which is X570, or it's going to be the B550s. You'll see some other exceptions in there, but that tends to be where I go. If you want to know what the difference is, you can do that, and it's pages like this that can help us. So here, just to settle curiosity, let's take a look at the B550. Oh, that is really small. Oh, this actually does a pretty nice job of... All right, so here's the B550 compared to the B450, all right? So it's going to talk about what it's compatible with. Like, for example, the B450 is for AMD Athlon. This is the predecessor to the Ryzens. So this is actually an older chipset. So the 550 chipset is actually only compatible with the later generations of the Ryzen. So the 3000 and the 5000 series. So that's the big thing that they're going to show us in terms of the difference. Now, in terms of what goes in on these individual processors, we can go back in on this and let's see. Got to find a nice place to dive into this thing. This doesn't do it quite as pretty as the Intel site does, but it's still okay. So what it's doing here is it's going to show us I am going to get that in there so you guys can see it. So it's got 20 usable PCIe 4 lanes. It's got 10 usable PCI 3 lanes. Remember when we were talking about PCI, folks, a single big slot on a motherboard is a PCI by 16. So the big long PCIe slots, that's 16 lanes right there. So we can eat up a lot of lanes with these 550s fairly easily. It's got 6 USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports, so that's the super high-speed ports. It's got 5 the Gen 1 ports, which are 5. It's got 6 USB 2 ports. Now, hang on a minute. Why would anybody sell a motherboard that has old USB 2.0 ports on it? Well, the reason is because stuff like mice and keyboards and all kinds of stuff like that, they don't need the super high-speed USB ports. So pretty much all motherboards today are going to have some USB 3.2s, some 3.1s. Nobody has 3.0 anymore, thank goodness. And then they go straight down to the 2 slots because that's what most people need. It works great. What else does this thing have? Overclocking. I didn't think that these Bs supported overclocking. Well, so you're going to go through these things, and you're going to be taking a lot of time. And guys, I've looked at these B550 chipsets. They've been around for a while, or 450s. I forget what they are, and then I have to go right back to these same sites and remind myself. And so then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take this kind of knowledge, and now I'm going to head back over to Micro Center, and I'm going to be taking a look at what they're offering And I'm going to go with chipsets that I probably like. So let's go ahead and just do that right now. So in this case, I'm going to go with the AMD 570, the X570. So this is going to have more overclocking support. It's going to have more PCIe lanes, stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to go with. If I didn't know for sure, I might just put in that X470 or even the 550 in here and just do comparators. All right, now when I get to this point, now what I'm going to be looking at more than anything else is brand names. Because I get real picky at this point about what I'm going to be putting in a system. So Asus Gigabyte. Asus Gigabyte ASRock. Get an idea? MSI, MSI, MSI. So this is where the hard work really starts kicking in. At this point, I'm going to start looking at 4, maybe 5 different motherboards. And the first thing I'm going to be looking at is price differential. If for a particular socket and a particular chipset, I'm getting very wide price differentials, I start to go, is there something in here I'm not looking at? Now do keep in mind that higher end motherboards, especially overclocker motherboards, come with a lot of wonderful features that if you're an overclocker, you might want to consider. Built-in post cards that, where the 2-digit hexadecimal readout laying right on the motherboard. That's going to add cost to it. Hardware resets and things like that. Gigabyte, for example, on their higher ends have what's called dual BIOS. Like if you accidentally upgrade your BIOS and you smoke it, which I've done, you've turned your system into an ashtray. With Gigabyte, they have a backup BIOS chip in there, which is wonderfully convenient, and it has saved my bacon on a few occasions. And there are people who buy Gigabyte just for that feature, and they'll never buy anything else. Active cooling systems are going to come into play. RGB lighting systems come into play. So there's a lot of stuff that can be added on or taken off that you make decisions on. Another one is RAID, if you want to use hardware RAID. As a matter of fact, I was looking at this one. Hang on a minute. Let's bring this back up. This is part of the reason I really like this Micro Center. Even if I may not buy from Micro Center, they really help me with my buying decisions just because they have good tool sets. All right, so take a look at this guy. So you can see I've got, well, this is fascinating. There's actually a mini ITX form factor for this one. ATX is pretty common. How many SATA ports do you want? Here's a couple that have, 5 of the motherboards have 8 SATA ports. That's impressive. None of these boards have RAID 5 built in. They have RAID 0, RAID 1, and RAID 10. And it looks like all of them have that. See that 18 there? So it looks like they've all got that. So, you know, built-in RAID isn't that crazy. Here's an option we were kind of talking about earlier. 2 of these only have 2 slots, and then 4 of them have 4 slots. This is one of the reasons I'm usually not a big fan about mini ITX, is that those little tiny motherboards almost always have just two slots for RAM. It's going to be fine as we talk about RAM here in a minute, but to limit myself to 2 slots, just from experience, makes me nervous. So let's get back to that browser. So the next thing that I'm going to be looking at is right here, and that is, where'd it go? So here's the memory type. So you can see that all, and this is pretty common, they're all using DDR4. No big surprise there. But and most of these motherboards can use a range of DDRs. So you're not have to stuck to any one particular speed. Remember, there's only about 18 motherboards there, or I guess 19 total. You can see all of them use DDR4 2133. Every motherboard out there is going to support a range of speeds, okay? All of these motherboards are DDR4, okay? No exception to that. And they're all going to use 288-pin SIMs. There's no difference to that. But they all accept a pretty broad cross-section of speeds. So what speed do you use? just as CPUs have a curve like this, RAM has a curve like this. And unless I'm going to be doing some really hairy overclocking, something that's really going down in the gators like that, I'm just going to pick some kind of mid-range speed arbitrarily and just go with it. I'm usually going to be looking for deals more than anything else. Now, so that's the important thing. So people are asking about DDR speeds. Your motherboard tells you what speed you can handle. When you buy the RAM, you make darn good and sure that you pick up a speed that it is acceptable. So now, we're still going to be going through this process a little bit more, but the one thing I want to stress to you guys is that I don't trust what this. Micro Center is a very good company, but I don't trust them. As I start sorting through and looking at all these different AMD motherboards, socket AM4 motherboards with the X570 chipset, see I keep narrowing it down. I'm going to probably get it down to about 4 or 5 motherboards that I like. And at that point, I'm going to start going to the manufacturer and I'm downloading the motherboard books. Everything. I want to see that motherboard book say that it supports DDR4 2800 or whatever I'm picking, okay? Because I don't want to return it. I want to make sure it works the first time. I don't want to jack with this. Does that make sense to you guys? So I'm going to be looking at these motherboard books. The other fun thing about as you download these motherboard books, is you really start to understand some of the feature sets in them. Hey, it's got onboard 802.11. Hey, it's got 2 M.2 slots. There's stuff like that you can really understand and get your head wrapped around. There's a lot more options here on this Micro Center. Let's use this. And by the way, I'm doing Micro Center here, guys, but there's lots of companies out there, online companies, that do equally good stuff like this. So I just like Wireshark. Here's another one, max memory supported. Most motherboards today are going to support either 64 or 128, all right? And I don't think I would want anything that only did 64. So I may just click on 128 there. No, I don't anticipate I'm putting 128 in. However, I do want to be a little bit careful about that type of stuff. Requires a CPU with integrated graphics. That's pretty much, if you see it says requires a CPU with integrated graphics, what they're telling you is it has onboard video card support. What they're telling you is this motherboard's got an HDMI connector, but it ain't got no video card built into the motherboard. So you have to make very good and sure that you have a CPU that has onboard graphics. And you'd say, well, wait a minute, Mike, I thought all Intel and AMD CPUs have built-in graphics. Nope, they don't. Especially when you get more towards the Intel i9s and the Ryzen 9s, a lot of those start taking that out because they're assuming you're going to be putting in a video card. So you want to be careful with that. The other thing you need to be very careful about is that if you take a motherboard that has onboard graphics and you put a CPU in there that doesn't have onboard graphics, they usually won't boot. They're just not going to boot. They won't break anything. You can return it and get the right thing, but they're not going to boot. So you always want to make very good and sure that if you're going to buy a motherboard with onboard graphics, that you have a CPU that supports onboard graphics. And it's just a matter of double checking the model number of the CPU you eventually decide to get. Wow, this has a lot of interesting features in here. In fact, more than I'm almost ready to talk about today. Now, let's talk about a couple more. Kind of cool. All right, so what else is this guy going to have? Multi-GPU support. If you're actually interested in doing Crossfire or SLI, that's where you put 2 video cards in that work like one. That would be in there. This is, in my opinion, this has fallen out as an area of interest, so I'm going to skip it. Here, you want onboard Wi-Fi. There you go. Oh, we're slimming this down the more we put stuff in here. See what else we got here. If you actually were carried about what kind of ATX connect, whoop, can you guys even see that? I don't think you can. This is the type of power connector you have. I'm not sure why it would worry about that, but it does. Number of USB 3. I don't trust this because this is 3.1. There's way too much 3.2 out there now. USB 2.0. Oh, here we go. This is what we were talking about earlier. Doggone it. Do you want two M.2 slots? Well, here you can make that selection right there. Let's say I want it. We're down to 4 motherboards. So land speed. It's pretty rare that you would run into a motherboard that has less than gigabyte anymore. Well, you see we have one motherboard that does 2.5 gig Ethernet. You see that? If you got a 2.5 gig switch, that would be nice. Audio, number of PCI Express slots. These are the number of 16 lane slots. Here you go, 2 of them. I want 2 slots. Wow. Scott's correcting me. Did I say gigabyte? All right. So here I wanted one that one that has 2 of those slots. So now I'm down to two motherboards. So I'm going to do a comparison on those. What a nice little feature they have here. And I'm down to 2 different motherboards. And they're both the same price, so that's not going to be a criteria. So I'm going to be pouring through this. I mean, pouring through this as I slowly go through and make sure that these really are the feature sets I wanted. This turned out pretty good. On a desktop system, to get a motherboard at the $200 or less range for a good motherboard, that's a good price. You can easily double that. Easily double that. And like if these had come up being $300 and that was outside of my budget, I'd go back to what I clicked on. He said, you know, do I really need to have one feature or another? And I'll take it out. And it helps me figure out where my prices are and to get where I want to go. One more time though, I want to make sure we're clear on this memory. So if you scroll through this guy, you can just see it right here. Do you see right here? It shows me what memory speeds I can use on this particular system. All right, so in this case, they both do DDR4 2666. Here it says 2667, that's the same speed. 2666 and 2667 are the exact same thing. So I'm going to decide for myself arbitrarily, because that's a good speed, that I'm going to go with DDR, I'm writing this down, DDR 2667. So now I've got a CPU and a motherboard that I know it's going to fit in, okay? Let's go buy some RAM. Buying RAM is boring. I'm going to warn you guys right now. There are two classes of people out there who buy RAM. There's the guys who want all the bells and the whistles, and they want laser beams and heat shields and all this stuff. I just want RAM that's going to be of the speed necessary to run the system. That's really all I care about. I don't think about anything else. So yeah, if it comes with pretty heat shields and RGB plugs so it'll glow blue and green, woohoo. But that's not really where my interest is. Don't let feature sets fool you, because a lot of times with RAM, sometimes these more full-featured RAM sticks can be sold at deep discounts. It's just a matter of how you're hitting the market at any given moment. RAM prices are very fluctuating. And if you hit RAM during a low, and don't try to predict them, folks, you'll never win. But if you hit it at a low point, suddenly Thermaltake or somebody like that who's a bigger RAM maker will collapse prices on their groovy RAM, and suddenly you're like, oh, I can get this really cool looking RAM for a lot less. All right, so let's go ahead and start looking at some RAM. So I'm staying here with Micro Center to do this. How do I get out of here? Sorry. All right, so I'm not going to let you sit here and watch while I'm clicking on how to get to RAM. Computer memory, desktop memory. Okay. All right, so let's take a look over here and let's talk about some of the memory issues. All right. Anytime there's a deal, I always check deals, but that's going to be a separate check. I'm not going to do that right now. Brand names, I will tell you right now, I know Nia Forza, and I know Crucial, and I know Corsair. I've never heard of these other two guys. That doesn't stop me from liking them. Like this G-Skill, God, there's like 42 different sticks of that. Just because there's a brand name that I don't recognize, it's not going to scare me off. I'm going to do some research on it though. You know, G-Skill DDR RAM review, enter, and see if there's anything scary popping up. But other than that, I'm not super brand name intensive when it comes to RAM. All right, so prices, I'm going to ignore that. Average rating, sure. All right, if you're going to give me an average rating, I'm going to take that. LED colors, you want some LEDs that have RGB on them, that's your call. I want DDR4. Now, memory capacity, you got to be careful here, folks. Remember, you're going to buy a motherboard that's either going to have 2 slots or 4 slots, unless you're really cool and you get with 8 slots. You have to have enough, you got to put enough memory in there, right? So today, I wouldn't even consider buying a system that has less than 16 gigabytes of RAM in it. So that's going to be 2 8-gig sticks. But if you can do 32, do it. More than 32, you're going to have to start, maybe you're doing a big virtualization machine, or you got a bunch of VMs and you never want to turn them off. That might be a reason to go beyond 32 gigs. But other than that, 32 is probably going to be your sweet spot. Maybe you're doing some serving or something where you could look at 64. Anyway, so the bottom line is you got to be really careful with what you're buying here. The motherboard will be able to support, remember the motherboard is going to support either 64 or 128. If it supports 128, then almost guarantees it has 4 slots, which means the most, it can handle 32 gig sticks in each slot. I don't think we're going to run into any sticks that are 64 gig. I'm looking, I don't see any. But that can happen sometimes, so you got to be careful about that. Does that make sense? And again, it's looking at your motherboard book to double check these things. So let's go through it. So what we've got here is whatever motherboard I picked. It's got 4 slots. It needs DDR4 2667. Got that? And the biggest individuals it can put in is it can put in 32 in each slot. Okay? And we're going to go for 64, so that probably means I need 2 32 gig sticks. All right, so here's one that sells 4 32 gig sticks. If I wanted to go straight to 128 gigabytes of RAM, I can buy individual sticks of 16. Now you see, most of these are sold in pairs or in 4s. That's normal, okay? So I want to go, what did I say? I want 64 gigs. So I can go with 2 32s to get 64. Or, where's the 16s? Or I can go with, I can buy 2 sets of 2 16s. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this one. And I'm going to select 2 by 32. Yeah. So this way I can either do 2 sticks of 32 or I can do 4 sticks of 16 to get to 64. Memory channels, all memories dual channel memory. That doesn't even mean anything anymore. And there's the 26. Ooh, I've only got one that gets it. All right, so if you take a look here, guys. You see I've only got one RAM that hands the DDR 2666, but look how many handle DDR4 3200. 14 of them. that's a clue that I may have made a poor choice in terms of RAM speed. And first of all, I could have gone ahead and just got 2667 and I would have been fine. But when I see a lot of other people getting a higher speed like that, I'm like, am I behind the times? So I'm going to go in and do some research on this and take a look. And first of all, double check and make sure that those motherboards I looked at can support, let's say, DDR4 3200. And if they do, I'll probably just go with the faster RAM. You're not going to see huge price increments in DDR4 RAM speeds unless you really go to the very top of DDR4 or the very bottom. It's just not that aggressive. So I'm going to go ahead and just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and click on DDR4 3200 just so we have enough selection so we can do some comparators and take a look at what we got. All right, so let's keep going through the browser. All right, so you'll see it says the memory speed in megahertz, and then the memory speed here, you'll see that it's, so PC4 25,600 is DDR4 3200. It's the same thing, folks. Don't let this confuse you. This 3200 times 8 is that number. So it's the same thing. We do not want ECC RAM. Let's talk about ECC. ECC or electronic ECC correction code, electronic correction code, error correction code. You have to have a motherboard that's designed for it. Very few home desktop systems support ECC. So if your motherboard doesn't ask for it, you don't do ECC. If you've got a server system or something, it may be using ECC, but in these cases, it's not going to deal with this at all. Okay, now here's one I was not expecting, and that's CAS latency. Okay, I started this. We're going to do it. This has to do with what's called RAM timings. And when you look at RAM physically looks like sticks, right? But electronically, it's squares. So that's why RAM, every time you double the RAM side, when you double the side of a RAM square, you get 4 times as much RAM. So if you think about this RAM, it's going to be like 16 gig, 64 gig, 256 gig, 1 gig. It always jumps up in these times 4, and it's because of the way RAM's configured at the blueprint level. So on one side of your RAM is called at the top is called the column address strobe, or CAS. On the other side is your row address strobe. So whenever you're trying to get memory out of these RAM chips, you press on different patterns of wires on the RAS, then you do on the CAS, and then 1 bit squirts out. Then you have a bunch of these chips, so they squirt out a number of bits at one time. So this is where what are called your RAM timings. And if you've ever seen these, usually it's 4 numbers. And the big slow number is what's called your CAS latency. Your column address strobe is the first thing that's charged up, and it's the slowest. So even though most RAM is measured by 4 RAM timings numbers, it's the CS latency which is the most interesting one. So if you take a look on, so you're like, oh, I have to deal with this. You don't. Pretty much all RAM is going to be fixed based on the speed. Well, the type, DDR4, that sets your CAS, and then the speed will set a particular CAS latency number. And I think it even shows this here, in here. And you'll see we only have one choice, which is 16. So that's a good thing. So we're just going to ignore that too. That's one of these things that I have to teach you because you don't need to know it. I'd love to do a big RAM timing course, but it just, you can see what happens when you're buying RAM. It's all taken care of for you. All right, anyway. Pin configuration, it's all DDR4, so it's all going to be 288 pin. And if you really want to pick what color heatsink, go for it, baby. And also then voltage, again, these are all preset. You're not going to ever mess with these. I really need to make sure you understand that. If you pick DDR4, okay, and it's going to be in a 288 pin package, you don't choose the voltage or any of that stuff. You just get the right speed, get the capacity you want, and snap it in. It'll work. That's it. All right. These other numbers, these are going to come into play more for overclockers more than anything else. And even those guys don't really mess with it very often. All right, so let's take a look at what we have come up with, setting all these criteria here. All right, we got. All right, so I got to look really carefully here. So this is 32 gigabytes total RAM. The first thing I'm going to be looking at is the total amount of RAM. This is 32, this is 32, this is 32. Oh, come on, didn't we have some 64s in there? These are all 32. Looking for one with a bigger, different price. Oh, here we go. Here's 2 by 32, so that's $300. All right. So I'm getting 64 gigs of RAM for $300. This is some kind of deal. I see these deals I'm telling you guys about. Versus, like, what's the cheapest I can get 32? Here's 119. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to beat this 119. Nope, looks like 119 is the best. So this Neo Forza, I'm going to, double check. Do some reviews, but that's probably what I'm going to be getting is that particular one if I want 32 gigs of RAM. But if I want 64, what am I going to pick? There's not a whole lot of choices here. And wow. So here's Crucial selling 64 gigs of RAM for $172. Man, I might go for that one. You can't be too rich or be too skinny. You also can't have too much RAM in your system. I guess technically you could. But if I can get 2 sticks of 32, I've got a 64 gigabyte system. And if I ever need to upgrade this system in the future, I've got 2 empty slots. And I could kick it up to 128. I could kick it up to 96 if I wanted to. Keep in mind that with dual channel memory, which is the predominant memory today, in each channel, each stick has to have the same speed and the same capacity. But if you've got 4 slots, you've got 2 separate channels in there. So with the other pair, you probably want the same speed. If at all possible, always put the same speed of RAM in your system. But there's not a problem putting 2 sticks of 8 in there. So I've got 64 plus 2 8s is 16, 70 whatever. No, 8, whatever, do the math. But you do have that flexibility. And this is a big mistake a lot of people make is that if they see they've got extra RAM slots, they feel that they have to have all the exact same RAM. Now, if you can do all the exact same RAM, do it. You'll usually get some benefits from that, but you don't have to. You don't have to. All right. So I now have a CPU. I now have a motherboard. I now have RAM. And in all probability, and guys, keep in mind, I tend to spend more money than other people, but there's no reason why you couldn't get a good low-end i7 or Ryzen 7 system for under $600, $500, with 32 gigs of RAM in it. And the nice part is a system like that is going to last you for 6 years. Oh, Scott's correcting me. I missed one of the memories. I looked at it wrong. Okay, well, one of them, thank you, Scott, for correcting me on the pricing of one of the RAMs that I was looking at, but I would be more careful. Oh, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. I can't tell you how many times I've bought memory and thought I was buying one thing and bought another. So you can get a lot of firepower for a pretty low amount of money. And particular, like you'd say, well, what about my video card? Well, maybe you just don't get a video card at this point in the game. You've got onboard video. And I'm telling you, unless you're really playing something hairy, onboard video does great. Any game that's been out in the past 5 years might have to work at it a little bit, but a lot of these games, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, World of Warcraft, stuff like that. Team Fortress 2, all these more cartoonish things, they run great on onboard graphics. You don't need a big card. Most people who buy big cards are wasting their money. I'd rather you see you spend more money on RAM and build more cool virtual machines. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is cooling. Now, I'm not a big fan of water cooling. I'm not against it at all. And it can certainly make some beautiful systems. Absolutely. Most of the CPUs I buy are going to be OEM CPUs. It's going to say Ryzen right on the box, and it's going to come in a box this big, and in that box is going to be the CPU, some heat dope, and a fan. And the fans work great. Both Intel and AMD with their OEM CPUs have excellent air cooling, and unless you're doing something crazy, you're smoking a lot of cigarettes or blocking airflow or something like that, they're going to be all you ever need. Liquid cooling systems are great, but those are for systems that everybody can look at and see, in my opinion, or if you're overclocking. Okay, there's one other reason to use liquid cooling. Most liquid cooling systems are very, very quiet. And if you're a person who likes it quiet, liquid cooling can be an excellent opportunity. You can buy custom kits and build your own liquid cooling, but in my opinion, the ones that cool the CPU and arguably, and only in some cases, the GPU, your video card, are all you're ever going to need. And these are pre-canned systems. Everything's pre-cut, everything's all connected. You got this big radiator that usually snaps on top of your case, and it just works. And they're beautiful, beautiful things. That's all I have to say on liquid cooling. The other thing I'm going to say very little on is RGB lighting. On today's system, in particular AMD, you can buy RGB lit, pre-lit motherboards. Even the OEM fans that come from AMD now are pre-lit RGB. You might get RAM with RGB on it. You can get a lot of stuff, and this just makes very, very pretty, glowy internals of your system. You have fun with those, mister. I've been doing RGB for about 3 years, and I've now reached the point with my systems where I just unplug it. RGB lighting is kind of like shaving. It's really fun the first 2 times. Then it turns into a lot of work. But it can be cool, and you can certainly have a lot of fun with it, and people make some beautiful systems. All right, so those are the big ones. The last thing I'm going to mention is power. Now, if you're going to be doing an ATX system, you're going to be getting an ATX power supply. I tend to overdo it with power, and I don't care. It's just how I am. I actually have a 1200 watt ATX power supply that I blow breakers with. That is probably double what I would ever need. Motherboards, CPU, and RAM use very little voltage relative to mass storage systems, lighting systems, all these other things that might be built into a computer. I would be hard-pressed to find a desktop system that needs more than 400 watts today, pushing it at 500. Start throwing some hard drives in there, some rotational media hard drives, that tune will change. But the reality is that with SSD storage, CPUs today are more efficient than they've ever been, and your system just doesn't use that much juice. You can go online, and companies like Crucial and people like that actually have calculators where you can type in, what brand of CPU you have, what brand of motherboard you have, and they'll give you a rough idea of how much power you're going to need, and you're going to be shocked. I've seen lots of what I thought were higher end systems that were running on 200 watt power supplies. Isn't that crazy? By 500 watts, you're going to be able to get something for under 80 bucks, and it's going to run great. Just make sure that you have a high efficiency power supply. when you're looking at power, actually, maybe we can do that here too. Let's do power. How are we doing on time? It is 3:30. My goodness, I'm going to go for just a moment. You know what? I'm going to stop right here. First of all, I'm going to start looking at questions right now, and let's see if you guys want to keep going more than anything. If this is an interesting topic that you guys want to continue. Okay, guys. Yeah, sorry, Eddie. Am I yawning again? Okay, first of all, guys, I need to hear a concurrence here. Do you guys want to keep talking about this? We can pick this up next Monday. Do you guys want to continue this conversation? I want to do power supplies. I want to do SATA. I want to do video cards and then cases. That's about it. So you need to type in yes or no. Trust me, guys, I'm not offended when people say no. Alan Duggan, does i7 CPU mean it has more longevity than i5? Or no, those numbers is in terms of capacity. Mainly like the difference between an i5 and an i7 is going to be the number of cores. More than anything else is cores. It used to be the amount of memory, cache and stuff like that, but even that's not there anymore. So usually like the biggest difference between an i5 and an i7 is going to be the number of cores and the speed of the CPU. Keep going. All right. Well, guys, we're going to go ahead and do that. Fine. Okay, so on Monday, we're going to pick this right back up, and we're going to finish building a system. And with luck, I may have some toys here to show you guys. So we'll see what happens. Scott Jernigan, you've been yelling about getting a new system. Maybe you and I can jump in a car and go head over to Micro Center. We actually have a Micro Center here. It's great. I mean, they basically dip you in hand sanitizer to let you get in there, but it works pretty good. Okay, let's go ahead, guys. I want to go ahead and start attacking some questions now. Sorry, Mr. Meeseeks. JS Brobbery 200, yes. Okay, dude, we got it. Mark M says yes. D.A. Carl says yes. All right, man. Dude, we're going to do it. Hey, Zach Morrill, I didn't see you come in. All right, let's see. Guys, it's time for questions. Now, keep in mind, a couple of things. Number one, that is, keep in mind that we have 50% discount on all of our bundles today. If you want the A+ practice questions with the simulations or the Net Plus with the simulations, we are offering those at 50% off. All you have to do is go to www.total7.com. Pick up the bundles. They're just in our merchant area. Pick up a bundle, and in the checkout, type in the code 011121. Scott Jernigan will put that all on there for you. Also, keep in mind, if you like what you're seeing, don't forget to click on that like button. It's still making me laugh to say that. And please subscribe to the Total Seminars channel. I'm going to keep going anyway, but I like to know people. They like me. They really like me. Eddie Lagos, PSUs, Mike. Eddie, I know we just kind of started on PSUs a little bit, but we'll go power supply units, the things that run them. I'm not sure what Eddie's asking. Okay, but power supply units, yes, absolutely. XMP. I think XMP is a joke when it comes to RAM. XMP is a kind of automated overclocking thing that I don't overclock at all, ever. I mean, I used to 15 years ago, but not anymore. Okay, I think we're in good shape. I'll tell you what, before let's do at least one quick contest. Can we do that? We're going to do a contest on the conversation we just had. Okay, you guys ready? Here's how these contests work for you new guys. I'm going to ask you a question, and you type the answer into the chat window. Whoever gets the question right is going to get free access to the A+ questions. How's that sound? So it's either 90 or 180 days free access to the A+ questions. So, guys ready? Here we go. Here comes the question. Let me get this up here so I can see where everybody is. Watch you guys. Got Tolwit in particular. Okay. Eddie Lagos, you wanted me to go for the free bundle? Fine. All right. So we're going for either the free A Plus or the free Net Plus bundle. You'll get to choose. Whoever wins gets Eddie. He just keeps asking for more things. All right. Here comes a question. Fingers on the keyboard. Here we go. All right. So we've been talking about RAM. Let's keep that up. If I have, you ready? DDR4 3200, 3200 RAM, what is the PC4 speed rating? I said it very quickly. I don't know how many people caught it. So DDR4-3200 is equal to PC4- what? It's a number. I'll give you a clue. Take 3200 and multiply it by something. So DDR4 3200 is equal to PC4- what? Give me a number. It's going to be PC4-. So take 3200 and multiply it times something. I'm going to let you guys work on this for a minute. I'm not getting any answers. Good. Yep. Oh, we have answers. All right. Look at it. Eddie Lagos. Eddie Lagos is the winner, people. Eddie Lagos, you win either your choice of the A Plus bundle or the Net Plus bundle. All you do to get your prize is send an email to Kathy with a K, KATHYY @totalsem.com and say, I was the winner of today's bundle contest. And make sure you say the word bundle. And Kathy will send you a password based on your email address. So congratulations to Eddie Lagos, because the right answer is peace. Oh, dang it. Eddie, you got it wrong. All right, you know what? I'm going to let it slide. Eddie Lagos, it's PC4-2500, 25,600. We're going to let it slide today. We're going to let it slide, all right? But here, I'm going to type it in the right way. Why is that not working? Oh, here, Eddie. But you know what? Oh, PC, it's not a $sign, it's a 4. Whew. Nah, Eddie, I'm going to give it to you because I like you better. Who is the next person? Eddie, you're going to keep it, but I'm feeling good today, so where'd it go? Okay, so actually Michael Reeves. Eddie, you still win. Eddie, you still win. We're just going to have 2 winners today. So the next person to type it in properly was Michael Reeves, who typed in PC4-25,600. So Michael Reeves, you also have won. Michael, in order to get your prize, all you got to do is send an email to kathyy @totalsem.com. That's Kathy with a K, KATHYY @totalsem.com. Scott Jernigan has the information for you right in there. So we got 2 winners today. Congratulations to both of you guys. So well done, gentlemen. Okay, so guys, seriously, if there's more questions, this is your Elbow. Yeah, I favorite. Elbow, you're my favorite. Oh, Michael Reeves wants to give it away. All right. Okay, somebody say, okay, type in, I desperately want this in there, and then I'm going to do it arbitrary. Michael Reeves giving it away. So Come on, guys. Somebody type it in there. Type in, say, I desperately want this prize. Hopefully one of you newbies are going to type in right here. Here you go, Muhammad. Here's your chance, amigo. Just waiting for somebody to type in, I desperately want this. This is hilarious. Okay, fine. I'll keep it then. Hey, that kind of hurts. All right, so let's see, do you have any more questions? Questions. Scott, did I miss anybody? What do you say, Scott? Join again? All right, he's all getting me for looking at the price of that RAM. Quantity, not the price. All right, wait a minute. Hey, all right. Hey, Michael Reeves, it looks like Sam McFarland says, I desperately want this. All right. Sam McFarland, you've got it, man. So Michael Reeves, you are giving it to Sam McFarland. Sam McFarland, jump onto the Discord here in about 20 minutes and thank Michael Reeves profusely for his generosity. Michael, thank you very much. I do appreciate that you spread the wealth around a little bit. Oh, Joseph, you were too slow. No, sorry, Joseph. Joseph, you got to come back on Monday. We do this all the time, Joseph. We're giving stuff away constantly, so please don't be afraid to come on back and try it again. All right. Sam McFarland, you got it, man. Yes, I see it now, Scott. Sam McFarland is the achiever of the deal. Well done. All right, guys, I think that's it. Slower day, that's always never a problem for me. I've been drinking an incredibly large amount of coffee. I don't know, let's go jogging at 3 a.m. Tell you, the one thing I do want to close with before we part company and head over to the Discord channel is I really can't stress to you guys how important it is for people. I don't like when people say, I can't afford a desktop. Okay, granted, maybe you can't afford the super high-end, XTR4 desktop with all the super bells and whistles on that. I can spend easily on a desktop system, excluding monitors, which I tend to spend a lot of money on. I can easily spend $1,400 to $2,000 on the system itself, but I can also spend less than a fourth of that. Little things that people forget about. Let me give you some examples. Number one, storage lasts a long time. Finding yourself some old desktop systems that have drives in them or anything like that that you can steal from that works good. The other thing that lasts a long time are cases. One of my cases that I love is got to be close to 20 years old. ATX has been around for a while, kids. And I've had 6 new motherboards. I call it the Millennium Falcon because on the outside it looks like garbage. But on the inside it's like, yeah. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on cases. You don't have to spend a lot of money, things like keyboards and stuff like that. Most of the time, if you're buying a motherboard, you can usually go up to the guy and go, give me a free keyboard and mouse. You'd be shocked how often you'll just get a free one. Video cards. Even if you want what is RTX video cards? The AMD brand. NVIDIA sells the 1600 series video cards, which are superb video cards. And they're less than $200, less than $150, depending on which one you get. AMD sells their RTX series, which can be, pretty inexpensive. RTX? Scott, am I saying that wrong? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's RTX. You don't have to have the, most cutting edge, it's not RTX. NVIDIA's are RTX. You don't have to have the most cutting edge, now I gotta look it up. RX, not RTX. AMD's selling RX Radeons, and then NVIDIA is selling, their latest is called the RTX. That's just unfortunate, those are coincidental. Yes, thank you, Scott. I had that wrong. RTX are the super high. you don't have to spend that kind of money to get plenty of system. And if you're even willing to go a little bit older than that, you can get ridiculously inexpensive systems that you can build up a pretty nice desktop system for sub $200 if you're willing to, go with a little bit older stuff. I go back and forth in terms of used systems, because the danger to used systems is you really have to know what you're looking at. There are perfectly good used systems out there, plenty of them, but unfortunately most people don't know what they're looking at. Dirt, corrosion, all kinds of stuff like that. So I get a little nervous. Plus, you need practice building systems. Oh, Andre, my favorite Belgian, brought up a good point, and that is that refurbished equipment. So it's technically used, but somebody's looked at it and fixed it, and you can get some good refurb equipment that works really, really well. All right, guys, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up. I'm having a cat insurrection going on here. Seems that Jack and Little Bit are trying to kill each other, and I'm going to have to separate the cats so that there isn't any cat death going on here. I will be on the Discord channel in about 15 minutes. Guys, please come back. Monday, we're going to be talking more about, we're going to finish talking about the Dream System and have that built up, and hopefully I'll have some toys to show you. Dave Rush, it will be on this Friday. Dave, what are we talking about on Friday? He said insurrection, topical. So Dave will put it up here in a moment, what will be happening. So Friday, for you new guys, that is turn your Raspberry Pi into a real DNS server. Oh, that sounds exciting. And so Dave will be talking about that on Friday. Guys, keep in mind that these Friday things that Dave does, I know we use Raspberry Pis. It's not just a Raspberry Pi course. Also keep in mind they're really Linux courses because you're doing installations and working from a command line. It's Network Plus courses because understanding how that you can work DNS. So a lot of people hear the word Raspberry Pi and they're like, well, I don't want to do Raspberry Pis. No, but you do want to do Raspberry Pis. You want to talk about a dirt cheap way to build up a system, do a lot of fun stuff, and Dave does an amazing job for that. All right, guys, I am out of here. I will see those of you who are going to be in the Discord channel. I'll see you guys in about a little under 15 minutes. And as for the rest of you, I will see you guys on Monday. And until then, this is your little Uncle Mikey saying good night. Good night.